Hi everyone, my name is Juan Pablo. Welcome again to a new YouTube video. And in this time, I would like to continue to show you those tricks, features within the XR boxes that we were, looking into that in the past video. So this time I have a new feature, which is kind of the opposite of the one that we saw before. Remember about the import from the default routing table into the VRF. So the feature I have now for you is export from VRF to the default routing table. This type of feature is quite needed whenever you have, for example, the border routers in a provider have connections over a VRF towards the external network to another providers, and that connection link is under a VRF. So whenever it's under a VRF and you receive, for example, internet prefixes, or you receive the default route from the other providers, then you would like probably to propagate that default route over the other PE devices that probably have users that are not under the VRF, that they are probably in the global routing table, which is common as well, right? Some providers have different type of users, not necessarily under the VRF. So for those type of users is whenever this feature is very, very, very useful, because this allows us to export, for example, the default route that we receive from the external network. Let's say that I have ASVR1 and I have a VRF over that connection, and over that session to the external network, I receive a default route. So then I would like to export that default route to the global routing table, the default routing table, for other PE's devices to receive that over BGP IPv4 address family. And then all the traffic from those PEs will be attracted to that ASVR that has the connection towards the external network. So let's see in an example in a lab, okay? So I'll continue to using my famous lab here, which is the one that I use normally for my bootcamps and the mock lab 1. I have 3-4 mock labs. So if you want to join to one of my bootcamps for different technologies, feel free, and you will be able to do and play with this type of lab. So in this network, again, we continue with ISP James. I have P1, P2, ASVR1, and ASVR2. ASVR1 has, again, a connection over that link towards the ENET router, the ENET ASVR. So this is external network. It represents the other service providers in the network. And also I have ASVR2. ASVR2 has also a connection over that link to the ENET ASVR. Now, ASVR2 has a particular difference. The interface that goes to the ENET ASVR is under a VRF INET, right? ASVR1 has this interface over the default global routing table. So really it's not quite useful in our example, but the ASVR2 has that interface over a VRF. So over that VRF, ASVR2 is receiving a default route from the ENET ASVR. So ENET ASVR is propagating a default route towards that session, and ASVR2 is receiving that default route under the VRF INET, okay? So now, ASVR2 has an BGP IPv4 session with the route reflector, and the route reflector also has a BGP IPv4 session with the other devices in the network. So we have a BGP IPv4 session. This in the global routing table. Obviously, we have another type of session as well, VPN and another type of address family, but our target for this example is just to focus on the default routing table. So then, route reflector 1 would like to propagate, let's say, a default route towards P1. P1, let's say that have a user, let's imagine, have a user, that this user is in the default global routing table, right? And P1, though, they needs to reach to the internet. So it means that it needs to have a default route to reach out to the INET prefixes, because probably the user that is behind the default routing table will like to access to the internet users. So for that, we need to do a trick for ASVR2. We will just remove the connection from ASVR1 for this time of the example. So we need in some way that ASVR2 will receive that default route, obviously, from the INET ASVR, and then we'll like to propagate that default route over BGP IPv4 global routing table address family, okay? That's very long name that I name it for BGP IPv4 in the global routing table, but never mind. So I receive a default route under the VRF INET, and I will configure this feature export to default routing table in the ASVR2, basically to export the default route over the default global routing table. So let's do that. For that, I have here my devices. So for example, let's verify that ASBR2 receive indeed the address family, sorry, the default route. It doesn't in the default routing table. Okay, so ASBR2 has this interface over the INET, which is the 003. So if I take a look here, this is the interface towards INET, and this is under a VRF. So I'm supposed to receive the default route over that VRF, which I receive, of course, right? So now ASBR2 in the default global routing table, it doesn't have anything, right? So we would like to export that default route that we receive under the VRF over the default routing table for P1 then to receive that route and to be able to reach out to the internet prefixes. So how I do that? Well, I need to go to ASBR2 and then under the VRF, which is INET, address family IPv4, I do export to default VRF route policy, and here I can just put a default route policy, which are already created. This default route policy basically contains the default route. So I want to pass the default route from the VRF INET into the global routing table. So that's the configuration that basically I need. Again, I export the default route from the VRF into the default global routing table. So then I do commit, right? And then if I see the global routing table in ASBR2, the BGP RIP, I am propagating the default route over BGP IPv4. So it means that in my session with my route reflector, well, ASBR2 doesn't have a session with the route reflector, so maybe I might need to connect to the route reflector. So let me just do this connection here. I thought I had everything set it up, but not. I need to configure the session over on the route reflector. Indeed, I have IPv4 in the route reflector, but probably in the ASBR2 I don't have IPv4 session to the route reflector. Yes, I only have IPv4 labeled unicast. So let me just enable IPv4 session or address family, sorry, under that neighbor, address family IPv4, next of self. Okay. So basically what I did is configure ASBR2 to have an IPv4 session with a reflector because I was missing that part. So now, well, here we see that the default route indeed is being exported from the INET VRF over the default routing table. And now my session with the reflector should be up soon. Let me just try to ping. It should work because obviously I have other address family as well. Enable it. Let me see if I am advertising that default route to the route reflector. Advertise routes. Indeed, I am advertising, and the next hop that I am putting there is my own loopback of ASBR2. Now, if I see that, P1 then should receive the default routing table over the session of IPv4. Okay, so here we see that P1 is being receiving that default route over IPv4 in the global routing table because ASBR2 basically export that default route that received over the VRF INET into the default routing table. Okay, and by that case, then P1 is able to reach out internet prefixes and provide access to the users that P1 has in the global routing table. Well, that was the video about this another shortcut within the XR software. Sorry. So I hope that you enjoyed this part, and again, I will continue uploading more of those shortcut commands that I normally call it non-theory commands because there is no big theory behind of them, but indeed they are very, very useful and very practical if you know how to use it. So I hope that you enjoyed again the video, and let's see you in the next one.